places. Come and see familiar faces. Uncle Meat, Rob Daniels, Jon Snow. Gimli's here, it's the place to go. Grab a stab of rock with Mike and the Bad Metal Man. Grab a stab of rock and hold on tight as hard as you can. Keyboard's here, it's time for a party. And Chris has got the comment started. Grab a stab of rock with Mike and the Bad Metal Man. Grab a stab of rock and hold on tight as hard as you can. Grab a stab of rock. Grab a stab of rock.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
Hi, doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing excellent. Nice to finally meet you face to face.
Likewise, yeah, it's great to meet you because we've known each other for almost a decade because I've been on WordPress since 2015. That's so long ago.
That was my first question, was how long have you been on WordPress? And I thought it was about a decade.
Yes, yeah, very close to it. Yeah.
That's amazing. So we are just awaiting Jex Russell. He was here and then he got disconnected. So there may be internet issues out in New Brunswick, Canada. Hello, Henry Wright. Thank you for watching. So just to get people caught up to speed, if you don't know what's going on today, we have Angie Moon, author of this brand new book, Crime of the Century, Classic Rock and True Crime, which is an original concept. I don't know of any other books doing this.
Yeah, it is pretty original. However, I actually didn't find out until after the fact that there were other books about it. So there was a Rock and Roll Nightmares, and I think there was Disgraceland as well. That's a podcast as well. And those are I found them on Amazon, but yeah, I didn't know about them when I wrote this book. And those books are much more Americano-centric than this one is, because this one has quite a few British stories. And then obviously with the first chapter, we're opening with a Canadian band, The Band.
Yes, indeed. I was listening to the band right here on the porch yesterday. In fact, we were listening to The Shape I'm In was the song that we played.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the book that your father was a police officer.
Yes, in California.
You are obviously, you're a classic rock addict. You have been for as long as we've known each other. Was it just a collision of those two things that kind of triggered this?
So yeah, that's exactly it. So it was mainly my dad is a big reason this book exists, because when I was 8 or 9 years old, ever since that age, we would be watching true crime documentaries every weekend. So, you know, there's 2020, 48 Hours, Dateline, all those sorts of things, all those programs. And then we'd watch them every Friday and Saturday. And that's how we'd spend the evenings.
Fascinating. And then, of course, your love of classic rock. Where did that come from?
Austin Powers, of all places.
Really?
When I was 14 years old. Yeah.
Well, that's a story I've never heard before, but that's cool.
Yeah, so this is some lore that is actually on my blog. So if you find it somewhere, if you search for Austin Powers on my blog, it's there. The whole story's there. And basically, I was just bored one day. I was living in a small town in Florida, going to secondary school there, and I was just bored. And I was like, okay, let's watch a comedy movie, because I really like comedy movies. I was like, okay, Austin Powers, never seen that one before. Let's watch it. And then, holy crap, that movie just made me fall in love with the 60s because of the aesthetic, you know, all the clothes and stuff like that. And I wanted to dress like Austin Powers.
Well, you have the cravat there, I believe is what it's called, but
yeah, it's a silk scarf, but yeah.
Very authentic. And for those who don't know, Angie also does a lot of fashion related stuff. So if you follow her on Instagram, you'll check out some really cool vintage outfits. But we're more here to talk about the book today. Jex and I kind of split it up into sections that we're most interested in. So I hope he can join us. But I personally like the way that you formatted this book. Like, you have a chapter about a band and a crime related to that band. You introduce both the band and the criminal in a way that you don't really need any background knowledge about either, really. You made this sort of like a really easy gateway to the subject.
Yes, that's exactly what I've aimed to do with all of my writing. So that's how I started the diversity of classic rock. I started it because I wanted this guide for classic rock that I've wanted to have since I was a teenager. So when I was 14, 15 years old, I couldn't find an approachable guide to classic rock, like the diversity of classic rock in this book. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to start myself. And it all started when I was doing radio in Chicago. So I was going to university there, and I was a DJ actually on the radio there. And I had my own show, and I made it very heavily classic rock focus. But the program director there was not happy with that. He was not having it because he was like, this isn't diverse enough. This is all a bunch of straight white men. And I was like, that's not true at all. And I made lists of all the LGBT musicians, all the Black musicians, all the Asian musicians, Hispanic musicians, Native American musicians, every background that you could find. And I was like, I'm going to show them that it is more diverse than you think in both the people who make it, but not just that, the sound as well.
Right. Yes, of course. The bands that you cover in this book are very diverse. You know, you've got the Kinks on one end of the spectrum to the Sex Pistols and Devo, you know, all related by the fact that you could umbrella them under this term classic rock, which, you know, in reality, the term classic rock, well, at least it used to mean when I was involved with radio, 20 years old, which now, you know, that's Stone Temple Pilots are a classic rock band. Matchbox 20 are a classic rock band, but you're more interested in the 60s in this book.
Yeah, in the 70s, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of 60s and 70s in there. A little bit of 50s because the oldest musician in there is Spade Cooley, who's a Native American country musician who killed his wife. And then Reagan wanted to, he was the governor at the time, he wanted to pardon him, which is just insane. Celebrity special treatment right there. And
wow.
Yeah, that was a big celebrity trial. And I think one of the most fascinating things about true crime for me are the celebrity trials. Celebrity trials, I think, are the most fascinating ones. Like O.J. Simpson, you know, that was definitely the one that really got people into celebrity trials. But it wasn't the first one.
Do you remember that one from childhood or no?
Well, I was actually a baby when all of that was going on. So my mother was pregnant with me when the car chase was going on. And then I was just a little baby when the trial was going on. So I didn't know anything, obviously, because I was a little kid. But as I grew up, yeah, it was always talked about, you know. So
yeah. It was.
And then one of my dad's favorite movies is Naked Gun. And O.J. Simpson's in that movie. So that would come up.
Yes, it's so strange to watch those films now, but that's a whole other topic we could go off on. I can't help but notice, though, the Kinks. Would you say they're your favorite band?
One of my favorites, yes, of all time. And today is Ray Davis's birthday. And yeah, this outfit is actually inspired by him because this actually looks kind of like what he would have worn on the stage in White City in 1973. Unfortunately, that's a very sad day in 1973 because he'd just gotten divorced. And then he nearly killed himself on stage that day.
Is that in the book?
No, I don't talk about that because it's not true crime related, and it's not. All of the Kinks' true crime connections are early on in their career because the Gacy thing happened in 1965 on their first U.S. tour, and that's the one that got them banned from the U.S. for 4 years. Yeah, that's 4 years because the Rolling Stones were actually not able to tour for 3 years, which is interesting. That's something that you wouldn't expect, but yeah, it's true. I talk about it in the Altamont chapter because
that's an eternity for the classic rock era. 3-4 years. That's a career. Like CCR lasted 4 years or somtheing like that, you know?
Not unlike what happened to Muhammad Ali. It's not unlike what happened to him, like where he was just blacklisted, you know, from boxing.
Right. There's some really fascinating stuff in here, by the way, folks. But you don't shy away from the famous stuff. Henry Wright mentioned the Manson trial. That's sort of the biggest one that you think of when you think
it's the biggest chunk of this book. There's multiple chapters on the Manson family, and everybody thinks that Charles Manson's only, you know, music connection was the Beach Boys, when that's not true at all. There were so many other ones. You know, Terry Melcher comes up because he wanted to kill Terry Melcher, but then Terry Melcher had left that rented house on Cielo Drive, and then guess who moved in? It was, you know, Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski who moved in, and then Roman Polanski was off in Europe at that time, and Sharon Tate was left there, you know, heavily pregnant, and then she was killed that night in August in 1969. Yeah. What a year in music. Now they say, and I haven't heard any of the music, but they say Manson was actually quite talented musically. Yes, and that's actually a big reason why I wrote this book. So fast forward to me being in university in 2016, 2017, that's when I was doing my master's. So I was in Ireland and I was doing radio again, but that time I actually had a lot more freedom to just do a pure classic rock show. So that's what I did. But I also guested once on a friend's radio show. So my friend in the journalism class, he's no longer with us, rest in peace. His name was Killian. And he invited me on his old chat show. And then in between, we'd just play some music. And for one of the songs that he decided to play in between, just when we were taking a break, he decided to play a nice sounding 60s folk song. And we're just sitting there relaxing, just talking. And then he turns off the song and he goes, "Angie, what did you think of the song?" And I said to him, oh, I think it's a very nice song. I like it. It sounds nice. And he's like, it's by Charles Manson. I was just taken aback. I was like, wait, he had music connections? Because I knew about Charles Manson, but I didn't know about the music connections. So then, that started me looking into it. And I kind of kept that idea in my back pocket for a few years until writing this book. So that must have been like 5 years I was sitting on the idea. But the Kinks were a big reason I wrote this, because I didn't find out just about one true crime connection, but two of them. And then it's just insane. My last blog post was about the similarities between Brian Wilson and Ray Davis. A lot of people don't compare them.
Jax, this is Angie.
Hi, Jax.
Hello.
Please continue. Please continue.
Okay, so we're talking about Ray Davis and Brian Wilson, and there's a lot of similarities between them. So some of the things I noticed, they have the same middle name, Douglas. Their last names both have 6 letters, Wilson and Davis, both 6 letters. And then, what other ones? So they're both in sibling groups. Both of them had true crime connections because of, Manson with the Beach Boys, and then Gacy and the Cray twins for the Kinks. And then just a lot of the same career trajectory stuff, a lot of both of them having mental health issues, both of them getting married pretty young, both having daughters. It's insane just how many connections there are. And I just love finding these connections and, seeing what connections we can make. And it's interesting, definitely. And then that's not the only one where there's a lot of, coincidences between the two people. So in this book, there are 2 chapters in the second section, one on Joe Meek and one on Phil Spector. Joe Meek was basically the British version of Phil Spector, for better and for worse in both ways. So for better, because he was a pioneering producer, and for worse, because he killed someone. And both of them murdered someone on February 3rd, the day the music died. And Joe Meek had this obsession with February 3rd because he went to a fortune teller someday in January 1958, and he drew tarot cards and wrote what came to mind, and it was Buddy Holly dies February 3rd. So this fortune teller accurately predicted the day that Buddy Holly died. However, it was not 1958, February 3rd, 1958, because that came and went, and Buddy Holly went on tour in the UK in March of 1958. So Joe Meek went over there to warn him because he was like, I think there's something up. And it turns out he was right. And he always believed he had this weird connection with Buddy Holly. Wow. And then when Phil Spector tried to meet Joe Meek refused because he thought that Phil Spector was going to steal his ideas.
A valid concern when you're in that competitive industry.
Yeah, he was just extremely paranoid. And I don't think it was helped by the fact that there was a lot of institutionalized homophobia in those days in England. So keep in mind, it wasn't until 1967 that being gay was legal in England. So before that, Joe Meek was arrested for being gay. And if that happened, your life was pretty much over. But by the 60s, if you were a celebrity, there were a bit more allowances. If you had money, it wasn't as bad. But still, it wasn't great either. It was really, really bad if you're working class. And what happened was Joe Meek ended up, getting blackmailed by the Cray twins. And then it's also believed, I found out after the fact, after I published this book in a book that I was reviewing for my blog. So this one was by Debbie Gendler, and it was about her seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show and being one of the first Beatles fans in America. She said that she believed that the Cray twins had something to do with Brian Epstein's death. And it wouldn't surprise me because Brian Epstein, he was also gay. He was arrested for being gay back in 1957. So, and then a decade later, he was dead. So it seems like all these famous people who were arrested for being gay, almost all of them died not long after they were arrested.
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to take a few minutes to absorb that. Jax, thank you for joining us. I know that you had a lot of work to do today. Why don't you let it go with a couple of questions?
Nice to meet you, Angie, first of all.
Very nice to meet you.
Sorry for being tardy.
No worries.
Oh, man, I can see the headlines now. Jex gets fired from Grab a Stack of Rock. Anyway, well, I've been watching on and off as I was finishing up my work, so I don't want to address anything that's already been addressed. But I had a chance to leaf through the book. I have not read the whole thing yet, but I was able to leaf through the preview copy, and I was just curious where the idea came to be, like the merger of true crime and rock and roll. But again, this might have been addressed already.
When I was doing extensive research on the Kinks for my blog, so I wrote a blog post called Listen to This, Not That, where we get into more of their obscure songs rather than just the hits, because everybody just seems to know the hits with the Kinks. It's very much like Thin Lizzy, another band that I very much love. Everybody knows The Boys Are Back in Town and Whiskey in the Jar, but Thin Lizzy fans will always tell you, those are not their best songs. go listen to something else. Like personally, I like Black Rose, a rock legend. That's my favorite of his because it really shows his poetry skills. And it's just a lovely tribute to Ireland. And I used to live in Ireland, so I was there for almost a decade. That's where my husband's from. So that's why I'm an Irish citizen. That's why I ended up here in the UK. So that's that story. But basically, when I was doing extensive research on the Kinks, I found out that they didn't just have one true crime connection, but two true crime connections. Because in 1965, that's when they met John Wayne Gacy on their 1965 U.S. tour. That's the one that got them banned from the U.S. for 4 years. 3 years was the Rolling Stones. That's the ones who couldn't tour for 3 years. But anyway, it could have gone a whole lot worse had they stayed at John Wayne Gacy's house. And then the whole thing with the Cray twins. So the Cray twins were basically like just Britain's like most notorious gangsters. And they were, you know, a big part of the swinging London scene. And they wanted to be celebrities really badly. So they got their photos taken by David Bailey, one of the most famous photographers who took all those pictures like the Rolling Stones and Twiggy and all those celebrities. And the Cray twins did once go to America and they spoke to some Italian mafia people there. And they told the Cray twins, do not do your own dirty work. They disobeyed. They thought, oh, no, I'm not going to listen to these guys. We're better than that. We're not going to get caught. Skill issue. And, you know, lo and behold, they killed some people and they ended up in jail. And they tried to get into show business because they wanted to be friends with everybody. They wanted to be friends with celebrities because when you have friends in high, powerful places, you know, you get a lot of allowances in society. And they wanted to manage the Kinks. That was a group that they really wanted to manage because they couldn't get the Beatles because, you know, Brian Epstein was, you know, powerful enough.
You want to ask another question, Jex? I went already.
Yeah, from the Kinks, I ended up finding even more connections as I started reading about all these bands. So yeah, that was the inspiration.
That's very cool. Yeah, I was surprised at just how many connections there were, and because you have a whole chapter. But again, I'm not going to go into spoilers here because I encourage anyone to buy the book and read it. But I was happy to see that you have a whole chapter on Devo, which is a band that I really like. I have many of their records, and this was all news to me. I never knew. And the album in question, which I'm not going to say which one, but the album in question, I've heard many times, and it blew my mind. It was very, very interesting stuff. So I was very happy.
Yeah, and I found out about it all because of a Twitter beef between John Hinckley and Devo. Because John Hinckley was just tweeting, "Devo, you owe me money," and I was like, "Wait, what?" So then I ended up reading the whole story. I was like, "Wait, he actually wrote song lyrics for Devo, and it was just a poem that he wrote for Jodie Foster. This is insane."
See, I didn't read that chapter. I let Jex read that one.
Yeah, you definitely should. It was mind blowing. I didn't know any of that stuff, and I've been a Devo fan for years, so it's really cool. I encourage anyone to read it. And also, you have a whole second section called Musicians Who Killed, which, again, well, to me, because I think I only knew of one, Phil Spector, and then the rest of
everyone knows that one.
Everyone knows that one. So I'm just like, is this all stuff that you knew beforehand? Or
some of it, yes. Like I definitely was familiar with Joe Meek. I didn't know actually about like Tower of Power, because there were a couple ones like Santana and Tower of Power. I didn't know that Santana, one of their original percussionists, Marcus Malone, killed someone, and I didn't know that Rick Stevens of Tower of Power also killed someone. That was, you know, that was definitely just news to me. And these are, you know, groups that I like and I've liked for a while. I'm trying to think of other ones. Little Willie John was an interesting one as well, because he was, you know, an R&B singer in the style of like James Brown, and, you know, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think the other one was Jim Gordon. That one was also really interesting as well, because he was one of the biggest session musicians in America. Like he played with everyone. He was basically America's version of Clem Cattini or Bobby Graham. Like if you look at his, you know, who he played with, he was playing with everybody.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy.
Well, maybe I'll jump in with a question here. Well, not really a question, more of an observation. Jumping back to the Manson thing, there was something that was really shocking to me, and that was I had no idea that he studied Scientology. Is that commonly known?
I wonder I think people could easily make the connection because he was very cult-like. I think people could make that connection. You know, it doesn't surprise me at all that he, you know, read about Scientology and read all sorts of things in prison. Like the one that really, you know, shocked me was, it was a book that I read in university, and it was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm like, yeah, that's not surprising. I mean, and I don't shy away from talking about the charming sides of these people, because like one thing that I find, and one thing I've learned from true crime, I think this is one of the most important takeaways you can get from it, is that basically some of the most dangerous people are the people that you wouldn't expect. They're the most ordinary looking people. You know, there's people people walk around wearing masks all the time, and you never know what they're really like. And that's something that definitely has stuck with me from all my viewing of true crime documentaries and reading about it. Definitely.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about Manson being able to befriend Dennis Wilson, who, you know, admittedly he seemed to be the kind of person that craved connections with friends and people. But
I think it helps that he had pretty girls with him. Like, that was it. Manson had these beautiful girls that got them to just hype up Charles Manson. He had his hype girls, basically, and his groupies.
He was smart.
Yeah.
He was smart. He knew how to use people.
If only they could use their talents, you know, for more constructive purposes, if only.
There's an alternate universe out there, maybe where he's an influential musician that did good in the universe. But who knows? Who knows, right? You mentioned that his upbringing wasn't very good. You know, he had an alcoholic mother and she was in jail, and like, it's almost like you don't want to say the person's doomed from the start, but he's certainly at a disadvantage from the start. Yeah,
it reminded me a lot of the case of Eileen Wuornos as well, because I watched a biopic of her, and I think it was starring was it Charlize Theron, I believe, who starred in it?
Yeah.
And Christina Ricci. Yeah, that one. That was a really good biopic. And yeah, I mean, she was also screwed from the beginning, but that's something that you notice just in so many of these, you know, murderers. So many of them just come from, you know, working class backgrounds. And I think, you know, it's the stuff that just made me more political and much more, you know, I guess, woke, but in the positive way, the original, you know, AAVE meaning, where I'm much more aware of these things and the class issues in the justice system. That's definitely something that I'm not afraid to shy away from in this book. I know that it might alienate some conservative readers, but I think it's, you know, important truths that need to be told.
Fair point. Jax, you want to go with the next one?
I guess. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place because I got.
He just got here. He just got here, folks.
Just throw me in the deep end. No, why don't you go with the next one, and I'll get a little more prepared.
All right, I'm going to ask a controversial question here.
Okay.
I enjoyed your overview of the Beatles' White Album. This could be the most difficult question that you're asked all day today, but where do you rank that album in the Beatles catalog?
Ooh, that is hard, because the Beatles had the most consistent discography of any rock band I can think of. I think the only other band that comes close in consistency of quality of their discography would be Led Zeppelin, but even they had a couple duds at the end. The Beatles were just consistent throughout. Oh my God, if I had to do a tier system, I wouldn't rank the White Album as one of my favorites, no. Okay. I definitely think I'm more of a Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Abbey Road kind of girl. I definitely would say I'm more of those.
Okay, fair. I'm a White Album, Abbey Road kind of tied for number one kind of guy. But yeah, it's an important album, obviously. But I did enjoy your little overview of it, because I mean, how do you sum up the White Album? But you did a pretty damn good job, if you ask me.
Thanks. I think it's just, I'd never like to take anything for granted. Like, I always explain everything. Maybe it'll bore some people, but I think it's just important to explain it, because, you know, you never know who's going to become a classic rock fan. And I want, you know, new classic rock fans. I don't like to gatekeep. I really hate some of the gatekeeping attitudes in the classic rock fandom. And that's a big part of, you know, I guess my ethos and what I do is I want to make this as approachable as possible, as unpretentious as possible, as fun as possible, and just one of the least stereotypical classic rock blogs you can think of, because I think it's such a male dominated field. And I think it was just, you know, I wanted to be unapologetically feminine in how I, you know, approach a lot of my stuff, where, you know, I'm not afraid to make things really pretty and almost Barbie-like, but in this kind of darker way.
Well, yeah, I mean, this album cover, this book cover is like, if you're going to use a word, maybe pretty is a good word for it.
Thanks.
I've noticed you've hidden like moons and things like that in there. You designed this yourself?
So I came up with the idea, and then a professional graphic designer made it come to life. But yeah, I found all the stock images, and then they actually picked the font, and I actually quite like it. I think they had a really good time picking the cover. Originally, I just was thinking, oh, maybe it'll just be a plain purple, but I'm glad they picked this sort of gradient purple. I really like that. It's my favorite color. And yeah, there's a lot of Easter eggs on the cover, because, you know, the motif is a tarot card, and hence the Joe Meek tarot card reading, February 3rd. Now, what's that guitar there? The Flying V, which was patented January 1958, right when that fortune teller predicted Buddy Holly's death. And who popularized the Flying V? Dave Davis, who was born February 3rd.
That's
It's
wild.
crazy how many coincidences there are in this book.
And a very subtle blood splatter on the Flying V that you don't get on like a further image away.
And I think what inspired just the cover was I was really inspired by Victorian book covers, because I was just scrolling and looking at pretty images and I was like, oh my God, there's these Victorian book covers and they look amazing. What I would give to have a book that looks like that. And this is like the closest we got, but you know, if I had the budget, I would love to do it like real Victorian style where it's all imprinted in the side and then it's all like relief. But you know, that's so expensive, especially for like an indie author. You know, you need the might of a publisher.
And the other issue is, of course, the Flying V was not yet invented in the Victorian age. But we'll just let that. That's an alternate history thing that we could get into another time.
Imagine.
Jex, did you want to jump in, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, no. Well, simple question, Angie. From the very beginning, like the beginning of the writing phase, all the way to publication, how long of a project would you say this was overall?
About 2 years. 2 years would definitely be it. And I think I would have definitely done this a lot quicker if I weren't chronically ill, because I was suffering from adenomyosis while writing this book. So I had extreme period pains, you know, for a good part of that period. So between when I started the book in May of 2021 up until November of 2022, I was just suffering from like chronic pain. So it would just come unpredictably. And, you know, some days I could work very well. Other days I couldn't at all. And I think, I don't know, this really kept me from going insane, because like, if I didn't have this, I don't know what I would have done. Right. But no, I'm glad that my hysterectomy happened in November of 2022. And, you know, that pain is all behind me now. Thankfully, it's a lot better now. You know, I don't have periods every month. That's good. And then, but at the same time, if I weren't chronically ill, I wouldn't have been unemployed. And the reason I could write this book is I didn't have a day job. This is what I was doing. My whole life was writing about classic rock. It's only recently that I got a day job and I got back into work, and I'm really proud of myself for finally, you know, making that step back and, you know, doing something else. And just, you know, I'll still be writing about classic rock. I don't think that'll ever stop, but you know, I got to pay the bills. So that's very important to me.
Exactly. Well, I guess that's like proof of everything happens for a reason, right? Like if that all didn't happen and you were off of work, you couldn't have had all the time to write the book. So that's kind of
right. Yeah. Like there's this funny quote, like from an interview Cillian Murphy did. And he went, luckily I was unemployed. And that's how he got like the role in Oppenheimer. And I was like, oh, that's funny. Yeah. I'm going to say that, you know, I'm going to frame it that way. Luckily I was unemployed. So that's why I was able to write this book. I had too much time on my hands.
Everything happens.
But yeah, I think my book really did help me get the job I have now. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. It can't hurt to have a published work on your resume, I suppose.
So what do you do now, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about where I work, but I just do social media for a small business in the area.
Okay.
Well, you're very good at social media.
Oh, thank you.
Like I said, she's got a WordPress, she's got an Instagram, so check those two out for some great content. And again, you've been at the WordPress thing for almost a decade. Jex is relatively new. He just joined this year. But it is a nice supportive community. And, you know, you've been producing excellent content for
thank you
all that time.
Don't
over
stop. 1 million words written and almost 1 million views all time on my blog. So I'm very proud.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Let me see. I'll go back to my written questions rather than continuing to wing it here. Paul McCartney. I didn't know that he bought the rights to Buddy Holly's catalog.
That was crazy. Like I guess I could see that because with Keith Moon went to the Buddy Holly movie premiere and he was with Paul McCartney right before he died. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Paul McCartney definitely did that because of the whole Buddy Holly story movie.
And it just kind of, as soon as I read that, it kind of reminded me of the whole Paul McCartney, Michael Jackson thing over the Beatles.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind.
I just saw the comment and was mentioning Judy Sill. Very happy to see her mentioned. She's very underrated. Definitely. I love her and I love Nick Drake. That's another musician I very much love. I've been listening so much to Nick Drake lately. I think he's one of the most listened to musicians now for me right now on Spotify. But no, his music's just really calming and, you know, he definitely deserved a lot better. One of my friends actually wants to go on a pilgrimage to Nick Drake's grave and I might be joining her for that. So that's going to be cool.
Where's that?
So it's in Warwickshire, and I actually live in Coventry, which is like kind of part of Warwickshire, but it's more the West Midlands technically. But yeah, like right next door is Warwickshire, and then probably maybe half an hour drive away from here is Nick Drake's grave, because he was from Tamworth and Arden.
Wow.
And that's that's somewhere in Warwickshire. Yeah.
I know Jen and I, we were kind of hoping to visit Richard Manuel's grave from the band over in Stratford, Ontario, half an hour down the road. So we might be looking for that this summer. But that was another great story. The band and Jack Ruby, of all people, but, you know, he was a nightclub owner. So,
yeah. Like, you know, it's, all those gangsters, you know, they had other businesses, you know. I mean, if you think of like the show Peaky Blinders, you know, they had other businesses. You know, Tommy Shelby had other ventures and stuff like that. It wasn't like he was just beating people up and that's all he was doing.
That's right. Tony Soprano owned a nightclub. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that's how you launder your money. I mean, Breaking Bad, they talk about like Saul Goodman just going, okay, here's the Q-tips and here's how we're going to launder the money with the nail salon. And yeah, I think what's interesting in this book is just the cultural beginning and the end of the 60s is represented in this book, because the cultural beginning of the 60s happened with the JFK assassination. You know, before that, the 60s was just a whole different, like, it was just basically called the long 50s is what it was. You know, that's a term that I ended up learning from a book that I'm reviewing for my blog. And it's a book about like kind of a Marxist look at classic rock.
Classic rock. Wow.
Yeah.
Another original subject.
Yeah, it was like, wow. And a lot of that book was kind of similar to stuff that I've written before, because I did talk a lot about like left-wing musicians in classic rock. Like, obviously, like the biggest ones that you can think of. I mean, obviously the Clash, Pink Floyd with Roger Waters, and then Joe Strummer. But then a lot of people don't realize that about Ray Davies of the Kinks. Like, a lot of people do not know about his left-wing side because they misinterpret his music as being more conservative, and they see his kind of old-fashioned kind of love of old-fashioned things as being very conservative, when really that's not true at all. And I have like so many quotes. I compiled them all on my website so people can read, yeah, he was a socialist. He said it himself. And when you look for like, was Ray Davies a socialist? I think one of my blog posts shows up first.
Well, it is an excellent resource. Yeah, it does come up a lot.
Thank you.
Stuff like that. Let me see. Jack, did you want to take the next question?
Yeah. So on a personal level, because I know I've heard from other people who are authors and I've written a book. They say once you write your first one, you know, you just want to keep writing and write your second one and third one. Do you have that feeling too? Like you just want to keep writing?
Yes.
Or,
Yes, I want to write a second one, but obviously with my job, I'm quite busy with that, and I have to figure out when to do it. And I'm focused on selling this book right now and selling out of my print run. Then I can think about book number 2. But yeah, I definitely have enough ideas for book number 2, because those are not the only true crime connections in rock and roll. Because in the next one, we're going to be talking about musicians who were murdered. And that one's going to be really hard for me to write, because some of these, it's just going to make me cry, because, you know, like obviously Sam Cooke, that one's going to make me cry a lot. John Lennon, that one's going to be really hard. Marvin Gaye, that one's going to be really hard. Actually, there's kind of a foreshadowing Easter egg in there, because the font on the title page, you can recognize that as being the font from Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. The title of this font, the name of the font is called Pence, and that's his middle name. So I'm sure it was inspired by Marvin Gaye.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm just putting the link up here so that people can order the book directly from you.
Thank you so much for your support. You've done a lot to support this book, and I want to thank you so much for it.
Well, I hope you know, we'll sell one, make it worth an hour of your time, but you can buy the book directly from the author there, or if you feel more comfortable using your Amazon account, it's available on the various Amazons all over the world, as far as I know.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, by all means, check it out. Support
and you don't even have to shop on your country's Amazon. Like, you can buy something from Amazon UK outside of the UK, because that's what I did when I was living in Ireland, because Ireland's not a big enough country to have their own Amazon site, even though they're now building a warehouse there, and obviously their European headquarters are in Ireland because of the whole tax dodging stuff.
Right. Well, we in Canada know this, as there are some things that apparently you can only buy on Amazon.com, so we occasionally have to pay the extra shipping to get it sent here.
Yeah, I saw recently that you did like this record shopping adventure in Toronto, and it was just such a trip for me, because I remember going to Sonic Boom when I was living in Toronto. So I was living there back in 2012, 2013, going to university, went to York, and yeah, that was a place that I'd go to a lot. Sonic Boom. I also went to Cops a lot. Cops Records on Queen Street. That's also a great place. Got a bunch of bargain records there.
Maybe just to enlighten the audience, list off everywhere you've lived if you can.
Okay, so I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, the Chicagoland area. So I was born in Highland Park. I've lived in Lake Bluff and Gurnee. So those are the two places I lived there. But I did come back to Chicago, so we'll get back to that. I've lived in Texas. So I lived in Dallas, the city proper, at the Hyatt Regency Dallas. And yeah, when I was in Dallas, I did go to the School Book Depository Museum. I did go there once. I lived in a rich suburb of Dallas called South Lake. So I did live there. I've also lived in Florida. So I lived in Naples, Florida. And then that's where my family are. My family are in Naples, Florida. And then I've lived in Toronto, Canada. And then when I moved back to Chicago, so I lived in Evanston, and I also lived in Chicago proper for a little bit. And I've lived in Limerick in Ireland. I've lived in Killarney in Ireland. And now I'm in Coventry in England.
Wow.
I like how Mike just stopped counting after a while.
Yeah, I just stopped counting because I was like, how do I go back to Chicago? I forget it. I'm not even going to continue counting after back to Chicago.
I'm just hoping I don't have to move again because we just bought a house here. That was last year we bought the house. And, you know, I spent so much energy just trying to furnish it and paint it and make it look nice. And I'm like, if I have to move again, I'm going to cry. My husband's an academic, so it could happen, you know, but he's trying to stay here in Coventry.
And just to give a shout out to my usual co-host, Harrison Kopp, in the bottom left corner there, you can't move, Angie, because then Harrison has to redesign his Angie sitting in the room Lego art. So therefore, you can't move. You have to stay, or you'll just inconvenience Harrison. A wonderful art today by Harrison Kopp, by the way. So big thanks to the Mad Metal Man for everything that you do. As far as this book goes, the process of getting it published, can you walk us through that?
Okay, so I did a hybrid self-publishing option. So one of the books I reviewed was a book about by a millennial my age. So he's 30. His name's Matthew, and he saw Bob Dylan a lot of times. Like if you count how many times he's seen Bob Dylan, you'd think he's a boomer, but he's not. He's my age, and he wrote all about the times that he saw Bob Dylan, and it's called Together Through Life. And he published it through Troubadour. And I asked him what was his experiences, and he said nice things about them. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. But I was trying to go through a traditional publishing option, but no dice. So yeah, that's how that ended up working. And it takes about 6 months to publish a book, to get it, you know, from, you know, your manuscript being sent to them to it being edited, and then all these behind the scenes things, cover design, the typesetting, which is obviously stuff I couldn't do. I was thinking, oh, maybe I can do it myself. No, you can't. One does not simply do that.
Well, our mutual friend Jackson Tim Derling has 3 books out. He just came out with this one here on Kansas.
Wow.
And I know for him, he has a friend who's in graphic design who helps him out with all that stuff. So, you know, for those out there, I do believe Angie is correct. It's all but impossible to do by yourself. You need somebody to help you with those details that, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I read my own writing, I can't read my own writing, there's so many typos, and I go through my blog and then I see stupid typos. I'm like, how the hell did I miss that?
Yes, right, Jax. You know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, it's because you know what it's supposed to say, so you just go over it. And then,
yeah.
And I think there's just certain things about my grammar that might be a bit funny sounding, because my first language, believe it or not, is Spanish. So my first words were in Spanish. You wouldn't know from my accent, but probably maybe through ways I word things, it might sound like, yeah, I'm an ESL speaker possibly. But yeah, that was definitely like certain things. I just don't know certain past tenses, when to use them. And I'm like, you know, because writing a book, it's not how you speak, you know, right. Like how you speak and how you write isn't exactly the same. So yeah, like what makes for good speaking doesn't make for good writing all the time.
And that's a hard lesson to learn. It's something they tried to teach us in school, but it is you see so many writers being like, so then I went there, and then you won't believe what happened, which isn't the way you write. It's the way that Jax and I would speak to each other. But when you write, there's a more structured, and it's tough, and you do need a proofreader. So I'm sorry, did you mention who did your proofreading?
So someone at the company. So Troubadour have their in-house editors, and they have graphic designers there, and they have marketing people. I did not opt for the marketing package, and I think that was the biggest mistake of my life with this book, because I needed, you know, I definitely need more marketing, and it's hard to do it yourself. And yeah, I mean, I try my best. I mean, I've actually sold more than half my amount of copies I have at home, so I have fewer than 50 copies left. So yeah, make sure to get them quick if you're going to get them directly through me. And I do offer some exclusives if you buy through me. So one of them is you can have my cat Bowie sign the book. and she can sign it with a paw print. So
I only got an
pad.
Angie signature. I didn't even think of an option to get the cat to sign. Opportunity lost.
And that's all because one of my friends asked for it. So a couple of my friends here in Coventry, they were like, okay, so we want a book that's signed by Bowie so we can tell everybody we have a book signed by Bowie. We're not going to specify anything about Bowie. And we're like, we're going to figure out a way to make it happen. And we did make it happen. We just bought like this ink pad that's basically made for babies' footprints. And it was pet safe. So that's what we ended up doing.
That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
I don't know anybody else who's done that.
I have a video of Bowie signing my book. It's really funny.
Is that available? People can see that?
Yeah, on Instagram. It's on YouTube as well. Got quite a few views on my YouTube channel. Like my YouTube channel is just Angie Moon. That's all it is.
Okay, there you go. I didn't realize that. I'm going to have to make sure I get you on my subscription. So I'll put that back up there. Singer Rusty Day was aligned with several rock legends in his career. In 1969, he joined Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, replacing John Drake. He recorded one album with the group Migration. Oh, interesting. Interesting. And John T. Snow, thank you for joining us today. He's going to buy one for his cats now.
A book or an ink pad?
Oh, that's a good question. John, you could buy a copy of the book signed by the cat, Bowie, or are you buying an ink pad so that you can have your cat sign your outgoing mail? That's a question we want to know. And now I had another question, and it just went completely out of my mind because of the ink pad discussion. Jax, do you want to save me here while I think of my next question?
Yeah, well, since we're on the topic of marketing, Angie, was it relatively easy marketing yourself? Like, I'm sure social media now with what it is, it's pretty accessible.
Really hard. Like what happens is with social media, the algorithm changes just so much. So I do social media as my work, and just doing it for yourself. In the past I get way more likes, and I think everybody's noticed this. Where in the past they get so much more likes than they do now. And it's hard because social media has just become pay to play, and basically, it's so hard because you're competing with companies that have so much money just to advertise. And then, they're trying to make you buy this blue check that you pay for. It's crazy. Right. It's just insane. Like just trying to get yourself out there on social media. And like one of the things I would caution people about when writing a book is you should make sure that you have a following. Because if you don't have a following, it's just going to be hard. Who are you going to sell the book to? There's just so many books out there on Amazon. There's so many books out there everywhere. And you can't just rely on search engine optimization and, just your family. You need a following. And it's really hard to build a following, but, I try.
And Henry brings up a very valid point here. Also interference from AI. We're getting a lot of noise here from stories, music, videos entirely created by AI. And at the risk of crowding out the little people like ourselves.
Yeah, it's really tough to be an artist. Like, you're getting devalued by people because I see, clothing makers talk about how, people complain about their prices, which, yeah, it is expensive, but you're paying for someone's time. You're paying for someone's skills. They are taking time out of their day to make something for you. Show some appreciation and pay them what they're worth. Because if you're telling them they charge too much, you're insulting them and telling them they're not worth that much.
Yeah, for sure. And we really appreciate anybody who supports this channel, Angie's book. We really appreciate it because we are just the little fish. Trust me, we are just a little fish in a very big pond. But again, to restate the obvious, you've at least come up with something here that not everybody is talking about, and that's, to me, what made this an interesting read.
And the second book is going to be much less Americano-centric. There's going to be some stories that are not from, the Anglosphere. Like one of the ones that I really want to talk about in the second book is Victor Jara. Now, Victor Jara was basically kind of like the Woody Guthrie or Pete Seeger of Chile, and he was murdered during the overthrow, when Pinochet overthrew the Allende government.
Wow.
He was basically, kidnapped, taken to the stadium, tortured, and then killed in front of a lot of people.
And this is a major artist in that country.
Oh yeah, like Victor Jara, one of the most famous in Chile. Like he was just a big folk singer, big socialist, big Allende supporter, and then he died. He was killed by these dictators. Yeah, and it was all funded by America because America just has its hands all over Latin America.
Yeah. Wow. See, that's again, we need a second book.
And then there's another one, but this one's in the Anglosphere because it happened in Ireland, and this was the Miami Show Band. So that is something that you can find a documentary about on Netflix, and it's the Miami Show Band massacre. So this was during the Troubles, because in the 70s it was the height of the Troubles. So it was Protestants versus Catholics, and then you had and then just people were just caught in the crossfire, just innocent people, just a band of musicians, just killed by I can't remember which side killed them. I'm thinking it was loyalists who did it and not Republicans, but I'm not sure.
But it was accidental, we think, or we don't know?
No, I think it was on purpose. Like, I think somebody bombed their van. Like, they just, car bombs were one of the big things in Northern Ireland, were car bombs. I mean, the Troubles is the whole reason that the police in Northern Ireland are the only ones in the British Isles to carry guns, because of, all of that history.
I see. Fascinating. Geez. See, I'm learning so much today. My brain is literally going to leak it out like a sieve after the show. Just like when you study for an exam and after the exam's gone, you've forgotten everything you just studied. But I mean, you've been accumulating this knowledge for years beyond what.
Oh yeah. Like, this was years of reading. Like, I've cited more sources in this book than my husband did in his PhD. So in his PhD, like, it took him 4 or 5 years to write it, his thesis. And it's definitely shorter than this book. This book is at least 100,000 words. His thesis is much shorter than that. And his, he cited way fewer sources. I've cited like 300 or so in this. And
so folks, in other words, she's done her homework here. This is not just,
thanks.
This is not just a fly-by-night book. This is sourced. You can look up the sources. You can read them yourself. And,
it's just that academia background there, because I have a master's in journalism, so that's what I was doing in Ireland when I second time I arrived there. So that was when I moved in with Owen, my husband, for good. We weren't ready to get married yet, so I needed something to do. So that's why I was doing a master's.
We may make a sale here.
Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you.
I also like, just because this is something we do on the show, I also like to show the spine of the product.
This is the hardcover edition of the book right here.
Beautiful.
So and then you'll see this in the hardcover edition, the Bloody Flying V again.
Nice.
Super Tramp once sang, bloody well right.
Now, is the hardcover exclusive to you?
So you can buy it. It's just print on demand. So I'm one of the few people in the world that has this. But I wanted one printed just for me. So
Okay, so you can.
I think it was kind of unnecessary, but I just like the way a hardcover feels. So I decided to pay the little extra amount.
If it was my book, I would have done it too. I would have ordered the deluxe hardcover for myself too. I mean, it's your book, right? You have to begin your library. You're going to have your first book, and I'm just really glad that after 9 years of writing, you've finally done this, because we've all talked about it. I should write my book. One of these days, I'm going to write my book. And going back to your quote from Cillian Murphy. You were lucky you were unemployed at that time. Like, would you say that this was a full-time job doing this?
Yes. 100% my writing was a full-time job. Like, I was dedicating so much to the diversity of classic rock in the years that I was unemployed. So between, 2017 and then up until like late 2023, that's all I was doing. That was all I was doing. My whole life was the diversity of classic rock. That was everything to me. And I have a couple other book ideas. I think one other book idea that's kind of related to this, because I still love writing about true crime, and I think maybe I do become the true crime and classic rock person.
Yes,
but I definitely want to do a whole book on celebrity trials. I have not seen a book on celebrity trials and the history of them, and I want to write about that.
I know that this book is focused on really a specific period of time, but I'm curious if you would ever tackle something a little bit more modern in classic rock, like, say, Jex was mentioning earlier. He was surprised he didn't see the Vince Neil car accident in this book.
I opted not to, because it was, it was an accident. I felt bad, and I was like, I don't know if that's on the same level as writing about Keith Moon and how he was maybe a bit reckless, but then, he kind of did what he needed to do. Maybe I should have written about Vince Neil. That was something I was considering, but I was just worried because I felt kind of bad when I was looking into the story, and maybe I should have done it. That was kind of a regret, but I'm thinking in the second book. I'm thinking of doing.
I was just going to say, Jax, all those who in favor of Angie putting Vince Neil into the second book, raise your hand.
Okay. You want Vince Neil? I'll give the people what they want.
was the biggest
I'm gonna do
surprise.
it.
When I first found there was a section called Musicians Who Killed, I thought Vince Neil's going to be in there, and he wasn't. I was like, oh, that's surprising. But
Yeah.
again, I learned some stuff.
All of them were car accidents. All like the accidental ones were car accidents, because I guess car accidents are just one of the most common causes of death out there. You know, people worry so much about plane crashes because of Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Richie Valens, but really, it's car crashes you need to worry about. You know, I think that's a big reason I don't drive, and I don't see myself driving because I'm a medical marijuana patient, and I do not trust myself behind the wheel of a car.
Pardon me, Amazon is here. I'll be right back.
But yeah, I think in the second book, what I want to do is make a third section. So I want to do 3 sections for the second book. And the first section I want to do is the ones who almost got away. So basically stories that I found out about after the fact, or ones that I opted not to write about in the first one that people really wanted to see in the second one. So that's what I want to do, is definitely a section on that, as well as, you know, talking about musicians who were murdered and talking about songs about true crime, which there are quite a few of them.
Yeah. See, I can't even think of any of them. So I'm learning so much stuff here. So
I am going to put this comment on the screen, even though it's an off-topic joke, but he does have a point here. He does have a point. We're going to let this comment, we're going to allow it.
Yeah. Let's see what else. I mean, yeah, I definitely want to do a whole songs on true crime list, because there's a few of them, like Bob Dylan's Hurricane. That one was all about Hurricane Carter, you know, that boxer who was wrongfully arrested and convicted of murder. And Bob Dylan wrote a whole song about him. And, you know, that definitely raised so much awareness of his case. Another one from the 70s that a lot of people will know about is I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. That was inspired by a school shooting. So this was just a teenage girl who just shot at a primary school from her apartment building. And when the police asked her why she did it, she said, I don't like Mondays. And then that's how Bob Geldof wrote the song.
Such a dark subject. Yet I always consider that sort of like one of those, if I'm having a bad Monday, I can put that song on and feel a little bit better. And now I'm never going to hear it the same again.
It changes everything, doesn't it?
It's like when people put the Cranberries Zombie on their Halloween playlist, just thinking about the title. And I'm like, no, if you look at the lyrics and then you know what they're talking about. They're talking about the Troubles in Ireland. That's what they're talking about. They're an Irish band. They're from Limerick. That's where I was living.
That and Dolores O'Riordan, she was
O'Riordan,
she was living in Canada for a long time, and I believe she died in Canada, unfortunately. But that was a great band. I'm just seeing we're getting close to the hour here, so I want to start wrapping up. We have discussed what you're up to. It is looking likely that we can count on another book in the future, but
and hopefully a third. Fingers crossed. I really want to do the celebrity trials one, but that's going to require so much research and just so much of my time. But I would love to do that with another person who's really into true crime. I really would love to.
A collaborative effort. There you go. If anybody out there who writes true crime is watching this video, contact Angie Moon. Diversity of Classic Rock. You've brought this up many times. This is your WordPress where you can find all these articles that are almost a decade's worth now of articles. I may as well just ask you, what inspired you to hit that create button on WordPress 9 years ago?
That was just a school assignment. So I was sitting on the idea of writing about the diversity of classic rock for about a year. So that's an idea that I came up with at the radio station in Chicago. And they were telling me, oh, all classic rock is just made by straight white men. And I was like, that's not true at all.
Right.
So I did all my research, and then, I was sitting on the idea because I wasn't sure, how am I going to execute it? What are people going to think of this? But really, it's become so much more than that. And that's all because of a class that I took in Ireland, and it was called Introduction to Social Media. And they said, you can write a blog about anything. Just pick anything. And I said, I'm going to do it about the diversity of classic rock. I'm going to make this happen. And I'm going to make this dream come true. And of course, led me.
And I'm
making
just
friends.
Thinking what I would have given, which organ would I have given up to be able to have taken a social media course back in my day, which of course didn't exist. But my God, I mean, that's just something I feel a lot of us, we now have this outlet to create and to communicate and to express ourselves. And it's a wonderful thing. And you clearly like to express yourself through your love of music. And that's something that most of us share, is a love of music. There's very few people out there who's like, I really don't like music. And so it's one of those connective tissues. And this has been a book all about connections.
It's what unites people, and that's what I think of it as, because as a mixed person, I had never felt like I truly fit in anywhere, but I knew one thing that wouldn't let me down, and that was music. That's what stuck with me through all those moves and through all these people just being mean to me was, well, at least I got my music. And I think a song that I could relate a lot to was Simon and Garfunkel's "I Am a Rock." That one was definitely a big relatable one.
Great song. Great
yes,
song.
absolutely. Jex, did you want to say anything before we wrap things up?
No, other than thank you for doing this interview. And again, I'm learning a lot, and it was great to hear where the ideas came from. And it's good to know that there are other books in the future, and I look forward to those as well.
Thank you. Make sure to write a review if you can, because I'd love to see reviews of it, on your blogs, on Amazon and Goodreads as well. If you can cross post there, that would be amazing as well, because that's something that I really need, is a lot more reviews.
Henry.
Okay, let's answer Henry's question.
Yeah, there's an idea for another book, the actual diversity of classic rock, a book about that.
Great question.
That is something that I was thinking of doing, but I think it's something that I really want to focus on, the true crime stuff and the classic rock stuff, to mix two things that I very much love. And I think the one thing that people will always be surprised by is that I've been into true crime longer than I've been into classic rock. That's just going to surprise everyone. But yeah, I guess it's just showing a different side of myself and trying new things and trying to cover different niches and, get true crime fans into classic rock and get classic rock fans into true crime. And it's just storytelling. That's simply what I do. That's all I do, is storytelling. And
you do it very well.
Thank you.
I had absolutely no issue breezing through the chapters that I read. There was no point at which I'm getting bogged down. I like the way that you break things up into chunks. It just felt very easy to digest. And, kudos to you. It is not an easy leap to go from blogger to published writer. It is not an easy leap. Basically, I only kind of know two people who have made this kind of transition from doing one thing to actually putting out a book. And again, kudos to you.
Thanks.
Be bought there or check your Amazon.
I think it's because, I think one thing, the reason I take this approach of just keeping it as simple as I can is because I think a lot of people think that being smart is all about sounding smart and sounding pretentious and knowing big words and, writing very flowery, when really, I think the smartest people can take the most complicated things and simplify them so anybody can understand them. That's a sign of true intelligence, in my opinion. And noticing patterns, that's a big sign of intelligence.
And this book is loaded with connections. As you were talking about those connections, I was kind of picturing one of those big crime boards with strings and the pins,
That's what I did. I did a video of that where I dressed up as Oppenheimer. I released it on the day of the Oscars because of it. Yeah.
Okay. So folks, give her a follow on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on WordPress, wherever, and absolutely check out the book at the address below or on Amazon. Angie, any final words before we get on with our weekends here?
Hope everyone has a nice weekend. And if you haven't bought Crime of the Century, I say there's two types of people. People who've bought and loved Crime of the Century and people who haven't yet. So make sure you get your copy as soon as you can. I look forward to hearing everybody's words about the book. Tell me about it, write reviews, just talk about the book, because the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. So, yeah.
There you go. There you go. And take it from her. She knows her social media. Jex, I thank you for coming in, albeit I'm sorry that you had those issues at the start. Before we go, do you want to plug your WordPress? You've got some stuff coming out.
Yeah, I got stuff in the works. I had a writer's block recently, and it's just kind of unblocked. So I'm starting to get a bunch of ideas. The only thing is I'm working on a bunch of stuff at the same time, because when it unblocked, I had all these ideas. So there's some stuff to come. That's all I'm saying.
An explosion. And we are going to just give you that address. jexcaliber.wordpress.com is where you can find that. Angie, what's the diversity of classic rock address off the top of your head?
crazyonclassicrock.com, and I named it after the Heart song Crazy on You.
I wish I had that song to play. Unfortunately, due to copyrights and the fact that I admittedly I try to monetize my videos when I can only play songs that are not copyrighted. So on the occasion of this classic rock special, I'm going to play something that sounds classic rockish, if I can find one. Next Plane to Vegas by Max the Axe. That's kind of classic rockish, isn't it?
Ooh.
Okay, so we're going to play some Max the Axe. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. I'll put the address up for the book one more time in case you missed it. Angie, thank you so much for doing this. Jex,
Thank you so much for inviting me. And, thank you so much for being an inspiration and an important part of the classic rock community.
oh, now I'm gonna blush. Jex, I gotta go.
Yeah, your blog's one of my favorites in the classic rock fandom, definitely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, both of you guys have a wonderful weekend. Again, I'll put the address up if you missed it for the book. This is Max the Axe with Next Plane to Vegas. Pick up
Cheers.
Crime of the Century by Angie Moon. Cheers, everyone.
I can't put my thumbs up. Crown Royal apple. Slaint. Captain Courageous, next plane to Vegas. I gotta go. Not so outrageous, next plane to Vegas. Win place.